welcome back. This is our second episode of The More You Know, and today we're coming at you with how to become a master of interview kung fu.
Woohoo! I love that title.
That is a great title.
I don't even care who
we
that
went
is.
over so many different possibilities for that.
Interview for revenue.
I liked
Could've
interview
been.
barbecue.
Oh,
a
interview. That's like
smorgasbord of
interview menu.
Yeah,
It's
interview
like all those things where you interview.
for a grand or two. That was the other one.
For a grand or two.
There you go.
Now it's just an interview with a drink or two.
There you go. And that's how we start all of these off, just so you know, because we're not naturally funny. We have to have a little help.
We have to have a little help. We're Irish. That's a good thing.
And speaking of that, if you've never seen this podcast or heard of it before, the whole point of this is we've both had a lot of experience. Dad's 34 plus years, 37 actually.
We should start off though by introducing ourselves.
Oh,
Because see, if they've never seen it before, they don't know who we are.
yeah, I was supposed to do that, wasn't I?
So
I'm Scott Moore.
And I'm Kevin Moore.
And together, we've been in this business for a long time.
Yeah, decades, almost 50 years. Actually, over 50 years.
Together,
combined.
if you do the math. Yeah.
34 and you are 18.
Almost 18.
Almost 18. I'm 19.
Yeah, so over the years, we've kind of run across various funny stories and anecdotes that are actually very educational. And that's what the whole purpose of this podcast is to be entertaining but yet informative on things that you may know or may not know in the real estate game. So a lot of times we overlook that, and we want to try not to do that. And
well, it's kind of hard
fun.
because whenever you're a consumer of real estate, it's like if we're practitioners, we've been that way for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we see as being common knowledge is really not so common.
Yeah.
So we're circling back with what we think of some of the most important things for consumers like yourself to understand about our business, and to maybe these are pieces of advice to help you, kind of overcome some of the challenges that come along with what arguably is the largest transaction most people make.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Single transaction, a lifetime. You might make a couple of the transactions, but it's it's a large investment each time you do that. You make a move. So
right. So this week's podcast, actually every 2 weeks. We do this every 2 weeks
we're
now.
We're gonna do this every 2 weeks.
So come back 2 weeks from now, and you're gonna see more of this, right?
All right, so this week's episode, we came up with a funny name on it. We've already said it's How to Master Becoming an Interview Kung Fu. And the reason why we picked that is we wanted to give you some ideas and some things to think about that you might not have to make sure you're asking the right questions of anybody that you're thinking about interviewing, whether that be somebody your family knows, or maybe even your family, or just the person that you've always used that is familiar. You just keep going back to them. We think that's great, but at the same time, you want to make sure you're getting the right person for yourself. So we have 3 subjects that is kind of like an umbrella. We
always do.
Like we always do, the 3 subjects, because we're creative like that.
Oh, yeah, we're creative.
But at the same time, we feel like these are the highlights that you want to know, and we'll have more information on this inside of a newsletter that we always produce.
Which you should always sign up for.
Which you should always sign up for. Yeah. And we'll tell you how to do that at the end of this podcast. But the 3 main subjects that we're going to look at is personality of the agent and the personality of the client,
right.
See how well they mesh together. And then we're also looking at communication and accessibility, because those are very, very important things. And
especially in today's market.
Especially in today's market.
Wild and crazy.
Wild and crazy, and we're going to get to just how crazy it is. And I think it's even more crazy for the Grand Rapids listeners than it might be for people maybe outside of our area, and that's a market by market basis. And then the last one is competency.
Competency.
Yeah, you'd think I wouldn't foul up on competency. I mean, that's the most important one, I think.
It's all, hey, when you're put on the spot, you're going to forget that. I know.
I wish I had a sheet of paper in front of me.
I wish I had to too. But those sheets of paper don't work for us, do they?
They don't. Maybe just one.
All those notes.
No,
they don't work for us. No.
But all right, let's get into the first subject. And the first subject, again, is personality. Now, why do we think that's so important? And I'm gonna throw this over to you first, Dad, and I'll add in my own thoughts.
I would say the most obvious point about that is that, if you don't like somebody, I mean, you might have a good first impression and whatever, or this is a referral, somebody sent you to them, and it might feel good in the beginning. But that's why it's so important, this interview process, right? Because the person, you need to bring that personality out. You need to see how your personalities mesh with their personalities, because no one, I don't care who you are, no one likes to take advice from somebody that they don't like.
That's very true, even if the advice is sound.
Absolutely. And maybe even more importantly, or just as important, they don't like to spend time with somebody they don't particularly like.
I agree. And, this is a very important process. It's very serious. There's a lot of money at stake. However, it should still be fun.
Well, sure it should.
The whole process should be, fairly lighthearted, except when you have to get down to the nitty-gritty stuff. But the rest of it should be fun.
And it's kind of like one of those deals where if you had a choice to go through a process like this with somebody that you like or somebody that you don't like, what would you do?
Yeah,
well, you kind of probably do the like. So I think personality is the first stepping stone to say, we need that basis. We need to be able to say to this person that's going to be working with us, and that you're going to be spending a lot of time with, and it is going to be, it could, because these are real estate transactions, it could get complicated.
Absolutely.
So this person needs to mesh with your personality. I would say that's number one. Right?
Yep, number one, absolutely. And it's much easier to develop trust with somebody that you like.
Exactly.
So that'll be the last point on that one. But the next one is vital, I believe. In any kind of transaction, or even somebody that you work with in your own business, when you're talking about communication and accessibility, if you've got something that's time sensitive, communication and accessibility are paramount.
Absolutely.
And that's our next point.
And I would think that the communication skills, and that it extends to both between practitioner and client, but it also extends onto every other member, every other service provider, everyone throughout the entire transaction. I think when we started in the beginning talking about accessibility and communication, our first and foremost place is where that sits between us as practitioners, if you picked someone else, your practitioner, and yourself.
Right.
And also, especially again in a market like we have, and the markets, there's wide ranging across the United States. We have a lot of these markets where there are way too many buyers for the amount of inventory that's there.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, we're running very low on inventory across the nation.
It's kind of, we've been in this business a long time, and I haven't ever seen it like this, right?
No.
And so it makes it doubly important to be able to have accessibility to your practitioner.
Right.
And we totally get it. We understand and we respect work-life balance. But whenever you're looking at a market that's as tight as this one and you're entering that thing, you kind of maybe want to discuss with them just exactly how accessible they will be, what kind of circumstances or what kind of limitations that they put on their own practice as far as being what hours they work, et cetera.
Right. When their cutoff is and all that. And the one thing that's wonderful about this business is that, every agent can design the way that they want to work. And
sure.
We're not here to disparage any one particular person's choice. Ours, part of the way that we work is that, we work every deal together. So even if you're on point with a particular client and I'm not, I'm abreast of what's going on in case you have something that, in your personal life that you need to go do or want to go do.
Right.
I can step in. And then likewise, when I'm doing something like, like bowling league. That's right, I bowl. You would think maybe it would be him, but no, it's me. And I own my own ball.
Bowling league, right?
Bowling league.
Those are important things.
That is. But, but it is one of those things where, you got to remember that your practitioner does have a life as well. But you also need to understand that they need to understand that if there's a house, and especially if you've been looking and you've lost out on a number of houses because of a hot and heavy market like we're in,
right?
Missing because of some league or some other relatively important event like church or something of that nature, you still need to have the option of being able to see that property so you don't miss out on it.
Right.
So if that agent has something lined up for you, it could work very, very well.
Right.
We do it.
We kind of have, our deal is we just we share the workload, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And we're accessible all the time by text. And if you're out of town, I think you were in Florida last week, and that didn't impact any of our ongoing client relationships.
Correct. Yeah.
I stepped into what was going on here. You're going to step in for whenever I need that, and that's not saying that's the best way to do it. That just works. That's just how we do things.
It. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Perfect.
So, one more last thing on the communication. Don't forget that your practitioner needs to be able to communicate really, really well with other practitioners. I think a lot of people don't think about that so much. They think about the hard charger and they're going to get this deal done for me. And sometimes that's very warranted, but it's also important to remember that, having a great working relationship with other practitioners in the business, that can really paint the way that your transaction is going to go. And sometimes it's hard to know because, that person's been working a long time and you don't necessarily get to see how they've worked every deal.
Exactly right. And it's also very difficult for, the client to actually get a sense for how they're being represented.
Correct.
Right? And we just will tell you from being in the business as long as we have been, our perspective is we're in personal contact, and we're also representing clients in personal contact with other practitioners. And so we sense that there are some that are more difficult to work with than others, and we strive not to be one of those people.
Right.
And the reason why that is not because we're goody two-shoes or anything like that. It's just that we don't serve our clients best when we do that. And if we do happen to make a mistake, then speaking for ourselves, I know for a fact, we don't have any problem with an apology.
Right.
Offering an apology, making sure that we take immediate steps to make an apology to mend that relationship.
And I think that's important. I mean, not only for the client's sake, but for our own reputation.
Believe it or not, it actually does color the transaction. It can be the differentiator between whether your offer is accepted or not accepted.
Yes, it can.
That's just a fact.
It goes right back to the personality thing. It's working with somebody that you like, and that's what happens once the deal is inked and everything. Then all of a sudden, the person that you were against in the transaction is now somebody that you have to work with to get the transaction closed.
Right, and it's that's why reputation is important. That's why credibility and doing honorable, ethical business is really important.
Very.
Because it does bleed over into, we got an offer in from so-and-so. It doesn't mean that we're going to throw out that offer. It just means that it's probably less advantageous. Right?
More difficult to close.
Yeah, more difficult to close. There's just some assumptions that are being made, and that's not always the right thing.
Correct.
But it's good. Communication and making sure that you're selecting somebody. And we'll have some questions for you that you can get into those with anybody who's interviewing for for very important work.
Right? Absolutely. And that brings us to our final, which is also very, very important, and that's competency. That's the toolbox that your practitioner has at their disposal. What are they going to be able to do to help you not just open the door and not just show you the purchase agreement
check
or
the closets,
check all those things that you kind of think that's what real estate agents do. There's so much more that goes behind the scenes, and you need to make sure that your agent kind of has those tools at hand. One of those examples would be these days, especially for buyers, you're thinking, okay, we got to get through the appraisal stage, but there's a big importance to the seller too on that, right?
Absolutely. In fact, this is kind of an unusual. It's an unusual thing that we're facing right now today, and normally it's not that big of a deal. It's just there's not as much demand on it. The market is not moving the way that it is. Our pricing is changing literally deal by deal, day by day.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And if you understand appraisal, the appraisal actually takes a look backwards and says to the bank, hey, look, this is a property that's worth this much money. Well, that same property 2 weeks from now, they're going to look back on the thing and that market's already passed it, right? So this is an example that we've chosen. It's not by far not the only thing that should be considered, but it's an example of what having tools in your box is all about. I would suggest that having a practitioner with some knowledge base of the USPAP, which is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice.
By the way, if you haven't figured this out, my father used to be an appraiser, so this is the one point where I listen to him more intently than other points because it's really, really useful information.
I want to make very clear, though, that we're not – thank you for that. Yeah. I want to make very clear that we're not out influencing appraisers. We're not out there saying, hey, this is what we want you to come in at, or giving them information they don't already have. I just recognize from my past experience in this business that there's not when you're in this pace where you're doing 15 a week or maybe even more than that, it makes it almost impossible for you to get deep dive on every single property that you're going to go see, right?
Right.
And so all we're doing, we have a knowledge, a base of knowledge when it comes to what a comparable sale that they could use would look like, right? And we're also able to gather up all the pertinent information that is around that comparable sale, right? So that they have the ability, when we deliver that to them, they just have a better rounded
idea of what's
knowledge.
happening.
Yeah, of knowledge, right? And how this affects a seller in the same way. So the buyer is saying, here's this amount of money that we're going to offer for the thing. And we're going to, in today's market, we're seeing appraisal gap coverages. If the appraisal doesn't come in at a certain price, here's all this extra money we're going to pay in cash to get that done. That's kind of a bit of a problem, both from a buyer perspective, as well, because they're saying now they're using up all their cash on a property that maybe absolutely would appraise for that. So the bank is not going to finance that money, right? That's going to come out of pocket. From a seller's perspective, if it's got an escalation clause these days, if it has appraisal gap coverage, and it's going to come in $15,000, $20,000 short because they didn't have the appropriate amount of information, then it damages the seller as well.
Correct.
Right?
And the reason for that is if the appraisal gap guarantee only goes to, let's say, 10 above, and it actually appraises for 20 grand below the agreed upon price, well, then that hurts the seller by 10.
Absolutely.
And
so
that's the important part for sellers to realize, that the appraisal might not be on your side, but it does matter to you that the buyer gets at least close enough to that appraisal that the gap guarantee covers the rest to get to the agreed upon price.
Exactly right. And that really means sometimes 10 to 20%. So it doesn't. It's also an art form these days, it appears, on what offer to accept, because most every property that we have for sale, listed for sale, is gone in 4 days.
4 days tends to be the average,
and with multiple offers. So consequently, doing all the groundwork behind the scenes in front of this transaction allows us to understand what we think the appraisal is going to be able to come in at realistically, not, that's why, as a side note, you might have I just want to offer 30,000 or 40,000 or just an unbelievable figure above what the asking price is, and we're going to get the offer. Well, that's not always necessarily true. It has everything to do with terms. It has everything to do with how that fits inside this appraisal model. So we're very much. I know that it's an example, but it's a very clear example these days of what a practitioner, a certain amount of knowledge that they would have to be able to do that.
Yeah, and make you successful in your transaction, whether you be on the buyer side or whether you be on the seller side. The last thing you want is to come up short and you're like, wow, not hitting the mark I wanted, especially if you're selling and you're looking to buy the next property. So, these are all things that, we wanted to highlight. And, if you have a practitioner that you use, that's your go-to, I think the important thing to know is if you've had great transactions with them, that's fantastic.
And they can go out and acquire that, the knowledge themselves also, because it's publicly available knowledge to be able to say, hey, I'm going to put this in my toolbox because I obviously need to know how to prepare my listings for when the appraiser comes in and what information they can reasonably and logically use.
Right.
Okay, so this is not something that's like innate to us, where we just happen to have a certain knowledge base about it, but it's no less important than other knowledge bases like how to be candid and diplomatic at the same time in our communications. How do we handle tough situations between family members and so these are all tools in the toolbox, and those are the things that make up the practice. That's why it's kind of, we're kind of advocates of having a little, looking for a practitioner with a little bit of experience, because it's not, it's not wasted.
Well,
it's not wasted time.
It's also, to your point, it's called a practice for a reason.
Absolutely.
The more you do it, the more you learn, the better you get at it. And, we're not saying that somebody who's brand new in the business can't do the business.
Absolutely not.
There are so many people that are excellent that don't really have that much time in the business, but, they've put a lot of tools in their toolbox. They've really educated themselves, and they have these skills, the life skills.
A lot of the challenges, a lot of the transactions that you have don't really have a lot of challenges.
That's true.
A fair amount of them, right? It's only whenever the transactions come along that have a lot of challenge.
Right.
That's when.
When you really need somebody who's got that deep toolbox. So
that's why it's so important, because that affects you financially, and that's why it's important to interview.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I think we hit all of our points, and again, if you've heard the last podcast, and I'm sure we'll say it again, we try not to s'more. That is a thing that thanks to my friends, they've actually made it a term.
That's where we talk too long.
That's where we talk too long. But we did want to make sure that we covered this as well as we could, and I know we left some things out because otherwise this would have been a week-long podcast. But we do have some more information that we can share. Earlier in the podcast, I mentioned a newsletter. We send out a newsletter each month. This month's is going to have more of the same subject, but more in depth, a little bit different look at a few things. So if you are interested in signing up, you can go to our webpage. You can sign up for that. There'll also be a link to it in the description. If you like what you're hearing here, if you find it entertaining and value, we'd like you to like and subscribe.
And we go over, both here and also on our newsletter, we go over, we take a snapshot every month of what's going on in the marketplace.
Right. Yep.
And we read. We're in the business, so we're all the time, every day, reading about even Canada's real estate market and every other thing that could happen, and how our inflation is affecting us these days. Right. And so we would like to invite you, not only for that information, but also we'd like to invite you to have fun. It's kind of a community. We do drawings every month, for just gift cards and things like that. And we also, we're going to be having some events just to get together. So we're creating a community that is well informed about. We want to make sure that they're well informed about our real estate business and what's happening inside our marketplace. But also, it's our way of staying connected with people that we've had.
Just enjoying fellowship.
Absolutely.
And, we're in the real estate business, but we have so many friends and so many clients that, they can connect and they can, go ahead and meet up and
no requirement at all.
Stuff. None at all. Just need an email. That's
if
really
you like to have fun and you like to be with people that are fun. That's what our intention is to turn that community into that.
Right.
Yeah, good.
So again, if you like this, subscribe, and we will see you in 2 weeks We're going to do
2 weeks,
every
yeah.
2 weeks now. So thank you for those who've told us how much they liked our first episode, and we're going to try to continue to do a great job for you.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you.
until next time, the more you know.
The more you know.